Hi, what's up? It's me, Karen, your favorite booktuber, and I'm here to talk about the films I watched in January. I watched a grand total of 2 movies and 1 musical. So let's just get right into it. The first film that I saw was Conclave. This movie is nominated for the Oscars, something. And I watched this, okay, like a little bit of backstory if you'd allow me. I went to Rome for the first time in January, and I went to the Sistine Chapel, and it's like a vibey place, believe it or not. Just really rich visuals. And when I left, I was just like, this is such a specific thing. The symbols and the motifs are really strong. I either need to watch the Da Vinci Code or watch Conclave. And I decided to watch Conclave because I've already seen the Da Vinci Code. And the Conclave is a film about the Pope has died. It's based off of a book, okay? But in this film, the Pope has died and they need to pick a new Pope. And the way that they do that is that they have this conclave where all of the cardinals of the world get together and they isolate themselves. They're not allowed to like talk to outside people, check the news, whatever it is. Like they are sequestered and need to pick a Pope, and it can only be achieved when they have like X majority. And every day they do this until they finally like pick the guy. And in this movie, I think it was just like the visuals are really strong because obviously red is a prominent color in this setting, and it's the color that the cardinals wear. It pops up in other ways. It's just the colors are so strong in this film. It's really fascinating, and the way that it starts off, it kind of has this almost documentary, like it feels like a documentary at first, because the director like makes the decision as these cardinals are gathering to like give us these shots of them, these very like, I was gonna use the word cinematic, but it feels very like almost a photograph. It's so clear that it feels like portraits of these people, and we're seeing then like the things that are happening on the back end. You know, if you're having a function like this, any sort of function, conference, whatever it is, like there's so many elements that one needs to prepare, but also because comes from an institution that's been around for so long, there's a lot of like rituals involved and like holding it to a certain standard. Like imagine if you're having a black tie wedding or a gala, something like that. Like this is the kind of level that we're trying to attain. Like there's specific codes and things that need to be done. And at one point when we see like the nun who's in charge of like the food and all that stuff, she's like just checking the dining room before any of the cardinals are there, and she like adjusts a wine glass like just ever so slightly. Like there's just this level of this attention to detail is so important. And we're seeing like the food being prepared in the back. Like that was for me some of the strongest like visual elements of this. And then what we're seeing is that there's kind of 2 plots happening, if you would. We have plot 1, which is we got to find a pope. A new pope needs to be found. And plot B, which is that the main character of this book, whose name I've forgotten, he is having a sort of crisis of faith, and he is having a hard time praying, and he feels a little bit lost. He had tried to resign from his role, but the Pope wouldn't let him, the old Pope, the one who died. So he's still here trying to usher in this conclave and make sure everything goes right, and has like kind of strict codes of conduct, I guess you could say. Like he feels this sense to see things through properly. And so those are like the 2 driving forces that are guiding this movie. It's interesting because what this also does reveal is the ways in which these men are, you know, they are leaders of the church. They are men of God, but also men who are plagued with, they're quite small-minded in many ways, and they have these like petty problems, and you're seeing these play out, and the stakes are quite high. And it's interesting to see this all play out. And I think that the character who really just like 10 out of 10 was Tedesco, who's this cardinal who's Italian, who feels quite strongly that we need to have an Italian person back in power in the Pope, and he's also very just like a bigot and a racist, and he's not nice, but visually he really popped off with his vape, and just like, because his vape is red, and in this regards it's like such a perfect mixing of just modernity and these like a cigarette as a vice, but also just it's the same shade of red as his garb. And he just will like pop up every now and then with his, because he is like the mean bad character of this film, but he'll just like be there sometimes just hitting the vape, and it's just so funny. I could have done with way more of him. Like in many regards, if we'd had another film that just like I need a film just dedicated to him. Like let's say now that he knows who the Pope is, he's mad, like what's he doing, what's happening. I just needed more. Then the film ends and there's a bit of a, it's just like, whoa, okay. And I do think that that ending, I can imagine that it worked better in the novel, because a novel is longer and bigger and it gives us more space to see things through. But from a film perspective, from the perspective of only having watched the film and seeing how we get to the end, I was not convinced. I think we needed more to believe that this cardinal who comes through from, that no one knew about because it was a secret, who's has been leading the church in Gobble, that he comes through and suddenly like people are flocking to him. I think I needed to have seen more examples of him talking, because the film is so focused on Drew's like crisis of faith that we don't get enough of that. And I think this film was quite long, so it probably would have made the film longer, but I do think that for me, we needed that in order for me to fully believe the ending. There was a really great line, because afterwards I went to read some reviews. I read the New York Times review. There was one really great line that just defined it perfectly for me. If I remember, maybe I'll put it in the show notes later on. So that was the first film I watched. Then I watched a musical. I was in London and I watched the Devil Wears Prada musical. Now, Devil Wears Prada is a film I have seen many, many times. Like, I know this plot front to back, A to Z, like I know it. And the musical is fairly faithful to the film rendition. There's only one major change, I guess you could say, is that they give Emily a love story, which was kind of fun to see. Musicals are long, and I had the misfortune of sitting right underneath the AC vent, and I was freezing throughout the whole, like, I think this show was 2 hours. So much so that during the intermission I considered leaving, and I wasn't the only one who thought it was cold. Like, people around me were also being like, it's really cold here. And so that kind of did affect my enjoyment of it. I do think that there was like a few jokes that were a little too silly, but they did get laughs. Like, but I thought that I did not think they were very funny. And what else did I have to say? Like, yeah, it was fun, but not my favorite musical. A musical that I saw a few years ago was Six, which is about Henry VIII's 6 wives. That's a really fun musical. Like, I came out of there being like, yeah, that was awesome. Devil Wears Prada one, I was just like, yeah, okay. This is a fun way for me to pass the time, but it did kind of make me think that the film was perfect and needed no extra, like, singing and dancing and all that jazz. So that was that. After that, I watched at the end of the month, I think this was on the very last day of January, I went to the Prince Charles Cinema in London and I watched Happy Together. Now, I need to add a little bit more backstory, if you would, in the sense that this theater was full. It was packed full of people. Every seat in the cinema was full. And I unfortunately was sitting in front of this guy, like a really just British lad, who shifted his head so much. And like, it just made it so uncomfortable for me, because I was like literally like all the way over here, like trying to watch, and then he'd like shift, or he'd put his hand in his hair, and then I'd have to like shift some more. And it was just an unpleasant viewing experience for me to have to like adjust to this guy, because this cinema is not like, the seats weren't like this. It was a bit more like this, you know? And so I'm not super tall, so it just was like an annoying like thing for me to deal with. But the film is really good. It's a great film. It starts off, we're looking at this relationship of these two gay men who've gone from Hong Kong to Argentina to just have a holiday, but they run out of money and they have to stay longer, and their relationship is really intense. Um, it starts off with the narrator being like my boyfriend would just every so often he would come back to me and he would be like, let's start over, let's start again. And every single time I acquiesced. How could I not start over? But he said something where it's like starting over means something different for him than it does for me. And you're just like seeing their relationship and the ways in which they have chemistry. There's something there, but they're also just not suited to or towards each other, or maybe it's just not this time and place, and they have arguments and issues. And at one point, the protagonist is taking care of the boyfriend because he got beat up and whatever, and he says something more like, these were our happiest times together. And it's just like it's upsetting. You're just like, oh, but also you see that and you see him caring for him, and just they do have a vibe and connections, and like it's there. They have the ingredients, if you would, for a relationship, but it's just it doesn't work. It doesn't give you a cake, I guess you could say, if you were to use these ingredients to make something. Or maybe a souffle is a better idea, that they have the ingredients for that, but very soon the souffle flops, it, crumbles. Um, and you're seeing like this, and then the protagonist is working in restaurants. He's working as a what do you call those people who work at a bar outside the door? He's like a bouncer. There you go. That's the word. He's a bouncer. All of these things, you're seeing these jobs that he has, and he has this friendship with this other guy, and you're seeing like, oh, something there. That's like interesting. And then the ending happens, and it's kind of a bit about like accepting who you are, I guess you could say, because the author does end up, he's speaking about his relationship with his father like very lightly, and writes a letter to him and decides to return home, and is just like, acknowledging that he had messed up, but he's now going back to like salvage what he can, and he's accepting that mantle of responsibility. Yeah, I thought it was really nice. The most beautiful scene is when these two men are dancing in the kitchen. It's just so charged. It's really good. Okay, sorry, I had like a coughing attack there, but yeah, that's everything that I watched. I would love to know if you saw any great films. If you are Oscar inclined, what are your predictions? What's happening? What are your thoughts? Yeah, with that, I'll see you in the next video. Bye.